Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Tim Bokatz. Now, in the past, Andrew and I have talked about a lot of different subjects and done a lot of episodes on specific media. You know, we've done episodes on drawing, on sculpture, on ceramics, but we've never done anything on digital photography. And I wanted to cover that, but since Andrew doesn't want to talk to me anymore, I needed to find somebody else. And I wanted to find somebody that has the expertise we need to talk about how you can get into teaching digital photography in your art room. And my mind went immediately to Jennifer Borel, who is going to join me today. Jen is a middle school teacher outside of Kansas City. She's a former AOE writer and current AOE instructor. She also has her own photography business. She has a ton of great ideas, and I'm really looking forward to comparing notes with her on teaching digital photography and seeing what kind of ideas she has, because I know they're going to be great. And maybe most importantly for our purposes today, Jen has a brand new Art Ed Pro learning pack that just came out on Sunday. It's called Bringing Digital Photography into Your Art Room. It has 20 videos, 8 resources, and just a plethora of great information. So if you enjoy this interview, this episode today, make sure you check out her learning pack. And if you haven't signed up for Art Ed Pro yet, go do it. Hey, there are almost 70 learning packs now, and there are new ones being released every month. The other 2 new releases for April, along with digital photography, are a learning pack on sketch notes and a learning pack on teaching foundational skills. So make sure you check out everything about Art Ed Pro at theartofed.com/pro. So like I said, I am really looking forward to chatting today about some good approaches to getting started with teaching digital photo, with cameras, concepts, ideas, and wherever else this conversation may lead us. Let's go ahead and get it started now. All right, and Jennifer Borel is joining me now. Jen, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm on spring break, so I'm getting a little rest and relaxation in.
Yes, that is something that every teacher needs, for sure.
Yes, it feels good.
Good. So let's dive in. I want to start off kind of simple here, talking all things digital photography today. So why do you love digital photography, or just photography in general? And what kinds of things do you think it can teach our students?
Sure. Well, I actually kind of fell in love with photography back when I was in high school, which is really ironic because I hope no one ever sees those photos that I took in high school because they are awful. But that was back before we really had digital cameras. They just weren't on the scene yet. They weren't very prevalent. So everything was in film, and you never knew what you were getting back until you got it back. And like I said, it wasn't my best work. But so when I got into college, digital cameras were just more available, and I started to invest in cameras and invest my time in learning about them, and I just kind of fell in love with it. It just sort of became my go-to art form, and I really I still enjoy the process today. I still enjoy learning about it today. And you asked what I think it can teach our students. I actually think it teaches our students quite a bit of patience. I'm pretty sure, isn't it true? You guys have talked on the show before about working with super fast students and super slow students.
Yes, we've done some episodes on that.
Yeah, it's a real problem. But I found that at least photography, you really have to it slows you down. I think a lot of our kids go in to a photography class and they're like, this is going to be easy. I just have to click a button. It takes a photo, because that's what they're used to. They have these digital devices where that's all they have to do. But if you're really teaching the art of photography and you're showing students how to use manual mode on their camera, It does take patience. It does take perseverance. They do have to learn how to read the light around them. Otherwise, they're going to end up with like a really washed out photo or a really dark photo.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, that's something I wanted to talk about too. Just the idea of, cameras versus phones that are so prevalent. And, like you said, everybody has them. So, when it does come to the classroom, when it comes to teaching photography, like where do you stand on cameras? Like, do you think kids need a DSLR, or can they learn with a point and shoot, or with, every kid or, a majority of your kids having phones with decent cameras? Can they just use their phones as a tool for photography?
Yeah, well, I would say in a perfect world, every art room would have a set of DSLR cameras, but
yes.
I don't know. I haven't really
we all know that's not the reality. So.
Yeah, I don't know many teachers that have $20,000 to spend on cameras. Maybe like if you're a high school photography teacher, then you have that already. But I think you can come up with some really fun lessons where you could incorporate like the camera off of your iPad or a digital device, or, really get your students excited and let them have their cell phones out in class. But if you're like wanting to teach them how to use like those basic concepts in photography, like shutter speed and ISO and aperture, then you're really going to need a DSLR camera, because there's just not a lot of point and shoot cameras or, phone cameras that have a manual mode on them.
Yeah. And so that makes sense. And let me kind of follow up with some of those basic concepts, because, when I taught photography, we always started out with shutter speed, because that's, the easiest thing for kids to get. And then we moved on to aperture and then ISO. So like, do you think that is a good way to approach those concepts, or are there more things out there or a better way to do that?
I would definitely say those three concepts are like where you want to start. When I taught photography, I tried to I guess you could probably back this up for me. When you're trying to teach shutter speed or, goodness sake, aperture to a bunch of students, it's kind of like over their head at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. They are hard concepts to teach. So I would say that I tried to more gear it with my students and talk about light, and talk about how photography is all about reading the light that's around you. And so we talk like, if your camera is set in automatic mode, then it's making all of these choices for you, and it's more than likely going to get it wrong. It's not going to do exactly what you want. But if you move into manual mode, then it's kind of like you're the boss telling the camera what to do, and you're trying to tell the camera what to do with all the light that's around you. And so when I talk about light as this big concept, then when we talk about shutter speed or aperture or ISO, each one of those things, I relate it back to light. Like, this is how light is working into this concept. And I don't know if it helps the kids or not, but I feel like it sort of ties those three concepts together on how they all fit together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that approach, and yeah, I like how you do tie those things together. So that is a really cool approach. And then I kind of wanted to move on to and talk about composition, because I think that is the biggest thing that kids struggle with. Like, for whatever reason, it's really tough for them to get on top of that. So, let me ask you about, how you approach that too. Like, everyone knows the rule of thirds, but beyond that, are there other composition tips and tricks that are easy to teach, or, easy for your kids to pick up? And I guess, sorry if I'm rambling here, but one other thing that I was just thinking about with composition, like, do you find any overlap between what you teach composition wise between like drawing and painting and what you teach in photography? Like, can those concepts transfer and make it easier for kids to understand?
Sure. I guess I'll start with your last question and work my way back. I think like there's definitely a link between when you're trying to teach your students a drawing lesson or a painting lesson and you start talking about composition. I know that I do sketchbooks every single week with my middle school students, and we talk about, what are you have this whole piece of paper. Are you going to draw your object really, really small and then have all this white space around it? Or how can you look at the composition differently? How can you pull things off the edge? How can you capture, a viewer's interest in this? And so I think that transfers really well into photography because you have to really survey your scene before you snap that photo. You have to think about what's going into it, how far away you are from your subject. I think there's a lot of tie-ins between the two. And you did mention rule of thirds. I would say yes, like more maybe high school students and maybe adults in the art fields, like they definitely know what rule of thirds is. Not so sure my middle school students do. Especially when you like just catch a glimpse of what they're posting on social media and you're like, man, like that's not the best compositional photo I've ever seen. But, so teaching that is important to begin with. Like that's a good place to start. And once they've kind of got that trick down, another thing I like to cover is avoiding a merger in your photo. A merger is something that is intersecting your subject somehow, whatever you're photographing, in a negative way. So, for instance, I'm sure every person out there has taken a photo and then looked at it later and realized like the person they were capturing the photo of has like a huge light pole coming out of their head because it was behind them.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have those winners. So, we kind of talk about like, well, if you were to maybe get down on the ground and shoot from the ground up, or if you were to move positions before you take that photo, that merger would disappear. And it's kind of nice because I have all of my own work done in photography, and I have my own mergers that have appeared in photos that I can pull those photos out and say like, okay, here's one that has, this horrible flagpole coming out of somebody's head. And then just by switching positions, you've gotten rid of it. You've made it more compositionally pleasing for someone to view. And another fun trick is teaching them like how to use their subjects to hide those mergers. Like just by changing your position, maybe you step up on a chair or something and you're able to hide a stop sign behind your subject so that you don't need to edit it out later, like in Photoshop or Lightroom. You can just take it, and it be perfect straight out of camera.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, you did a nice job explaining that because you said mergers. I was like, what in the heck? Because I don't know. Yeah. Is that something that everybody knows? Am I just out of the loop here?
No, actually, this is a word that I just actually heard of. I've always had that conversation, but I didn't know there was a term for
an actual term for it. All
they're
right.
They're called mergers, apparently.
Okay, well, I feel much smarter now, so thank you. Okay.
No problem. I do too.
Okay, so let's say we've got concepts down, we've got some of these basic ideas down. When it comes time to move into actual projects, like what are some of your favorite photo projects to teach? Like what kind of subject matters do you want your students to take on, and why do you want them to take on those ideas?
That's a good question, and that's probably where a lot of photography teachers kind of start. Like, what do I want to teach my kids? One of my personal favorite lessons actually came from something that I did while I was in college. We had this assignment that we were supposed to capture portraits of people, which it seems pretty typical. At some point in a semester, you're going to cover portraits. But the reason I liked this is because the professor kind of took a different spin on it, and it was it was about creating or like taking portraits, but like they were obstructed somehow. So I ended up taking this idea and turning it into a lesson called Portraits Without Faces, which seems really weird when you think about that title.
Yeah.
But like, this is a good way for me to describe it. I'm sure you're familiar, or the listeners are familiar with MC Escher's hand with reflecting sphere, where MC Escher is drawing a self-portrait of himself, but it's in the sphere instead of like actually of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's, the sphere is obstructing the view of the portrait somehow, or it's just a different way to see the portrait. And so that's the kind of concept that then we pull into actual, the students' actual photos. And they have a lot of fun with this because first they get to go get their friends involved, and they always enjoy bringing them into whatever, photography lesson they're working on. I know that when I'm showing some of my examples of like things I've done, I have a picture of my mom actually, and she's taking like some kids' bubbles that you would blow, and she's blowing bubbles, and I was able to capture her face like through the bubble, so it's a little bit distorted. But you're not like looking directly at her face. Like there's something interfering with it. And I like this idea because I feel like kids can get really creative, and usually there's a lot of fun stuff that gets turned in for the class to view. There's more fun projects though, like I really like working with a macro lens, which is a lens that will zoom in really close to your subject. And so it's fun to like, have kids go out and look for like the elements of art, principles of design, and they're using a macro lens to like find items that somehow reflect those concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all sorts of ways you can pull in those art concepts into photography classes. But yeah, the face lesson is definitely one of my favorites. I talk about it actually and show some pictures in the Photography Pro Pack that's being released here soon. So yeah, it's definitely something I would check out so you can actually see photos from it.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to checking that out for sure. Now, I just have one last question for you, because I know there's one more thing that a lot of people struggle with when they are doing digital photography. Hey, when it's time to turn in work, like how do you do it? Like what advice do you have? Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of turning in digital work, how you organize it, and then maybe how you assess or grade all of the work that is coming into you?
Yeah. Well, for me, you're working with a digital format, so I really like things to be turned in digitally. It just helps me stay organized. So I'm actually like, I'm a Google girl all the way. My whole district is set up with like the Google Suite, so all the students work on that, and just makes sense to kind of go that direction for me. So my personal favorite platform is Google Classroom. I know the longer it's out, it seems like more teachers are becoming familiar with this platform, but if you haven't checked it out, I would highly encourage it. It's pretty awesome. But you essentially can make a classroom that's online, and you can push out assignments on there, and then students can turn in their work to that assignment that you've put onto the classroom. So I can assign something, and they have all the directions there, and whenever they are finished taking their digital work or they've gone through post-editing, they can just send it right back. They can attach that file back and turn the project in, which is super convenient when you're trying to
that's awesome.
keep everything organized. But that being said, I am also like the queen of my own personal digital photos, like going to some horrible graveyard of digital files. I mean, ever since, phones became more prevalent, I mean, I'm sure you're probably the same. Who goes and prints photos anymore? It just doesn't seem to happen. So I do, when a student is like really excited about a portrait or something that they've taken, I do encourage like students to actually print out their work, or we mat their work. Sometimes there's exhibits that they can put their work in. It just kind of takes it up another level from it just being an assignment that they had to turn in. But now, like seeing it printed out, it almost feels more like a work of art. So when they have their works printed out, or even if we're showing them digitally, I love like gathering the class around to talk about it. I feel like there's always some kid who brings up something about someone's work that I wasn't expecting and just sort of changes the way I view that work. I like hearing about what the students were thinking when they took a picture. You never know. Sometimes these students get pretty in depth with the things that, I don't know, they were thinking or feeling when they took these photos. So it's fun to be able to talk about their work actually in class. And usually when I assess their art or their photography, I'm looking at like their effort level or their creativity level, asking questions like, did they meet the requirements? And sometimes those conversations we have about the photograph also plays into their grade. So I don't want it to become something where the kid hates photography by the end of the class. Like, I just want them to be able to grow, and they can go out and continue to take amazing photos and know how to do that without feeling like trapped in automatic mode where they can't get out of that.
Yeah, that's cool. That makes a lot of sense. And I think everything you just said there is really good advice. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. So Jen, thank you so much for joining me today and passing along all of your advice. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. That was a really fun talk. I appreciate all of Jen's insights, and it was good to talk some shop about teaching digital photography. Now, if you want to dive in a little bit deeper, I have a couple suggestions for you. First of all, we have a couple excellent articles that I will link in the show notes. One was written by Andrew, probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Just some really good tips for, teaching digital photography, introducing it to your students. And we also have a new one from Ray Yang that just came out last month. Okay, so we have one old one new with some great ideas on lessons, some tips and tricks for teaching that can really help you. And secondly, if you really want to jump into a lot of information, make sure you check out Jen's Pro Learning Pack. She mentioned it during the interview. I mentioned it in the introduction. And when you put all this together, there are just so many resources out there, and hopefully they can all help you bring this creative, this engaging art form that's hopefully new to your students and give them something to get excited about. Art Ed Radio is produced by The Art of Education with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Remember, you can sign up for our email list at artedradio.com, find all of that awesome content I was just talking about, and listen to all of our old episodes. Maybe even find something new that you just can't wait to teach. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week.